Welcome to Inside Sponsorship, the show that provides sponsorship professionals with advice, insights and news so they can maximise their commercial programs and achieve best practice.
We've got so much information we can access across so many devices, and more rights holders and brands are creating content, not to mention friends and people in our professional networks, creating content on social channels that it's almost inescapable. And for a lot of us, we spend a huge amount of time on computers and on our mobile devices, so much so that those mobile devices feel like they are an extension of a limb. How often have you just reached for your phone when your attention isn't being held by something? It has become our default. Reach for the phone to find something that will engage us. Our attention spans are becoming shorter and we get distracted more easily. And there lies the challenge for both rights holders and brands. With so much access and so much content, the pressure to create great and engaging content that holds an audience's attention well is huge. One person who knows a lot about the space is Spencer Nolan, Head of Consulting UK and Europe at Nielsen Sports. And Spencer joins us on the show to discuss number 3 in Nielsen Sports Commercial Trends in Sport 2017, and that is changing attention spans prompting rights holders to rethink. I'm your host, Daniel Oyston, and you're listening to episode 43 of Inside Sponsorship. Wherever you are in the world, and whether you are a long-time listener or a new one, it's great to have you listening. Before we hear from Spencer, normally this is where I'd give a shout out to a listener who shot us a note to say hi and let us know where they work or where in the world they are listening to the show from. But sadly, no one has been in touch lately. Now, mostly that's sad for me because I feel really great about myself when people get in touch to let us know that they like the show. But help us out. If you haven't been in touch before, just drop me an email at daniel@sponserve.net or find me on LinkedIn at using Daniel Oyston, or find Sponserve on Facebook, Twitter or Instagram, because a recent study has found that 90% of people who get a shout out on the show become a 15% better sponsorship or commercial manager. And that may or may not be true, but do yourself a favour, get in touch and we'll give you a shout out. So in light of no shout outs, I thought I'd give a shout out to some people I met last week. So last week I headed to Sydney for the annual AusPod conference at the ABC. It's a great chance to get out of the office and to meet and to talk shop with lots of other podcasters, and also take some time to think about your own show and hear from some industry experts about the trends and what they're doing with their shows. But the night before, the Sydney Podcasters Meetup Group convened at Radio Hub's headquarters, where Cooper Silk and Craig Markham, hosts of the Sydney Roosters podcast, welcomed us for an informal gathering. So a shout out to those guys. The meetup was great and the chats were great and the hospitality was certainly fantastic. And just quickly, as we start to get close to episode 50 of Inside Sponsorship, I've got a few ideas to help spruce up the show. So if you, the listeners, have any segments or things you'd love to hear in the show, then be sure to get in touch and let me know. Also joining us on the podcast, as usual, is our MD, Mark Thompson, who, whenever we welcome a Nielsen staff member on the show to discuss one of their commercial trends, he also blogs about the topic through the lens of what the trend means for the sponsorship industry. And this time around, Mark outlines the opportunities that present themselves for both rights holders and brands because of those changing attention spans. Here's Mark. Mark Thompson, welcome to the show.
Hi Daniel, how are you doing?
I'm pretty good, how are you?
I'm well.
What have we got on the agenda for today?
We're talking about the rights holders being forced to adjust sponsorship because of the changing attention spans in the market.
Easy one to write? Sat down, just banged it out?
Funnily enough, I got sidetracked because my attention wasn't able to be held for long enough. So I was sitting down to write it and looked out my window, just out here at the office. There's a big construction site across the road and there's this bloke just walking there hosing dirt.
Oh, glad I don't have that job.
He wasn't cleaning anything, he was just hosing a pile of dirt.
So as you sat down to write a blog about attention spans, you got distracted by a bloke hosing dirt.
Because of my attention span.
Well, because it's funny, I remember reading that a couple of years back, Microsoft surveyed about 2,000 people and they studied the brain activity of a couple of hundred people in various tasks and things like that. And in that report, I think they said that they cited that the average attention span now is just 8 seconds, when it used to be 12 about 15, 16 years ago, and the which is interesting because the average goldfish apparently only has an attention span of 9 seconds. Where would you peg yours?
Sorry?
Yeah. Leave the jokes to me. So, I mean, we've got a lot going on in our lives, don't we?
Yeah, mate, heaps going on. So that, you know, and more is accessible than before. I wouldn't say more is going on in our lives than before. It was just, you know, without the information being at our fingertips, we're able to filter it better. So now that the sort of temptation of just accessing information after information, having a quick look at Facebook, having a look at Instagram, having a game of golf on an app or something like that, it's just all there, right? So the ability for people to connect, or us to connect with them through multiple channels at once, is kind of makes it hard to stay focused.
And so that Nielsen Sports have written about this trend in their Commercial Trends in Sport 2017 report. What's that trend tell us?
Look, it actually gives us a big number, so bigger than I thought. 15% of the population has shifted their interest levels from one specific thing, so liking one specific sporting team or one specific product line or brand, to having those same 15% of people having a slight interest in a much wider variety of things.
I wonder if that's because we've, like you were saying before, we've just got access to more stuff, so we're exposed to more things, and so, you know, just based on numbers, our interest has probably peaked a little bit, isn't it?
I think also, and it's not so much a learned behaviour as more of an ingrained one, because the trend speaks about women as being a sort of a target market for this research, but also the millennial and centennial sort of generations. So they've, especially the centennials, they've grown up with this technology. So they haven't known anything else. I still remember having to, you know, circular dial a friend's phone number on the phone.
Yeah, that's.
I remember the day they brought in an extra number on our phone number.
Yeah, well, I've lived in this city long enough when it only had 6 digits, the phone numbers. So anyway, apart from not having to use dialed phones anymore and shorter phone numbers, what's it all mean for sponsorship?
So sponsorship professionals, the insights that we read in these types of reports, for me, should be taken really seriously, because not only do they sort of inform us of how our market's currently thinking, it actually shapes the way we need to start thinking around how we activate and drive value in our partnerships. How content is consumed is really sort of interesting then around how you help work with your partners around certain, things relating to sponsorship assets. So, yeah, it is quite interesting for me around psychologically how to access the right audience using the right medium.
And while stating the obvious, there's always two sides of the fence in sponsorship. At a minimum, there's the opportunities for rights holders, and then there's also opportunities for brands. Let's take a look at the opportunities for rights holders.
Look, I focus this on how rights holders can use this information to stand out from the crowd. And as per usual, I've broken it down into a small list. I help this target my attention span.
I can see that.
So, the
number one.
The first one is the diversification of available benefits, to offer current and existing partners, because of, the knowledge that different audiences react and engage with different mediums and different platforms and different types of content, enable you to sell more stuff to more people, more brands, depending on who they're looking to target. If you can create a list of benefits that helps engage that. It also, by understanding this information, it gives you a better chance of accessing a new generation of audience, because they're actually going to engage with you rather than just sort of passively not taking much notice of a billboard or something. And then the increased revenue opportunities that are sort of available to you by providing more relevant content to brands who are looking to attract specific audiences, and those brands may not have otherwise been interested in you as a rights holder, because they might have pigeonholed you as being a sporting team rather than a media opportunity to access a new generation and gender or segment of the market.
Well, what's interesting for me there is you spoke first about diversification, then accessing the new generation, and then increased revenue opportunities. I think diversification and then accessing increased revenue opportunities comes from that second point around understanding those new audiences, that new generation of audience, because then you can take a look at what opportunities there are the properties and benefits that align with them because of those channels that they're accessing information through, and then taking those opportunities to a sponsor with a good understanding of the audience.
And that's exactly where these sorts of research pieces and the companies that perform them, Nielsen in this case, that's why they're so important, and their relevance has never been higher.
As a good neighbour, let's stick our head over the other side of the fence and take a look at brands. What opportunities are there for brands when they're considering the changing attention spans of audiences? Look,
a lot of this just quantifies, what everyone's known for a while, is that the days of sponsorship just being about brand recognition and positioning are long gone. So sponsorship is now used as a strategy to engage audiences, which brands would otherwise find difficult to attract, and understanding this type of information gives them the opportunity to leverage a mutually engaging interest, which is the rights holder to hit those sort of target markets strategically rather than just through a passive logo somewhere. So I think brands can now have the right to work with rights holders to drive objective-based outcomes against benefits. They can then use that information to engage audiences through a really wide variety of sort of methods, which target sort of a direct segment of the fan group of the rights holder.
What's on the table? Does all that boil down to cannibalising the opportunities? So we might have had X number of opportunities over there. They're just shifting. Is there more opportunity, or is it less because it's niche? Where do you think it sits?
I think there's more opportunity. So, there's far more opportunities than threats that emerge out of this trend. Obviously, it does threaten some traditional big dollar figure partnerships, perhaps.
Well, and the threat is also if you don't change to meet the changing attention spans and audience, then you're stagnant and you become pretty susceptible then.
There's a critical threat that kind of threatens your existence, so you have to at least be moving in some way forward.
I'll edit some dark music under that.
Look, some of the sort of opportunities that should excite sponsorship professionals, like what we said before, the ability to offer a wider range of benefits tailored for specific audiences. Then they're following on commercial revenue growth opportunities because of the larger lists of benefits. This is the most attractive part for me, though, is being able to go out and find new brands to your portfolio and move away from those sort of 8 core, airline, bank.
And is it fair to say that a lot of these opportunities might, because they are quite niche, they probably give some of those non-big traditional core areas of sponsorship, automotive, airlines, those sorts of, gives you the opportunity to bring some smaller brands into the fold?
Yeah, the challenger brands can come in even within those categories, because you may even you can segment down those categories if you know your audience well enough. Somebody like a Lexus or a Range Rover, they've got a specific target market. If you can quantify what segments of your market are within their target market, it's kind of a waste of time and money hitting those other ones that aren't part of those. So you could segment out and have a sort of a luxury car partnership and a sort of everyday man car partnership.
Yeah, that's me.
Yeah. What do you got, a Kia?
No, I don't have a Kia. They don't make... No.
You used to.
No, my wife had a Kia. Where will this take us? Where are we going with all this? Is our attention span going to get that bad that we can't pay attention to anything? Or is the onus and the focus back on the rights holders and the brands to work together to, like you said earlier, access the right audiences through the right channels, but actually put engaging content in front of them so that they get more than an average share of attention, which is ultimately leads to achieving their objectives and their return on investment? Yeah,
look, I actually think that this kind of insight helps you launch an argument to move sponsorship away from a luxury or appetite-based marketing tactic. And it actually moves it further towards being a necessary strategic move because rights holders own those audiences. They've got such a high affinity with them, and research will show you the realisation of loyalty towards brands that sponsor a mutually loved sort of rights holder in a sporting sense, a football team. That's hitting an audience that you're not going to hit through traditional means. So it becomes necessary if you want to be a relevant brand in the marketplace. Sponsorship must be at least a highly considered part of your strategy.
If you want to read that full blog, just head along to sponserve.net, head to the resources section and then the blog section. Great chat. Before you go, we just check how old mate went with the hose in the dirt.
It's still there, but it looks cleaner.
Cheers, mate.
Cheers.
Over the last 20 years, Spencer Nolan has amassed a wealth of consulting experience because before joining Nielsen Sports with the acquisition of Repucom in 2016, Spencer previously worked for Cello Media, a subsidiary of Liberty Global, as strategy and M&A director. Spencer brings significant broadcast and media industry experience, having driven strategic projects for the group and led the valuations of numerous companies across the media value chain as both a channel owner and platform operator. Prior to Liberty Global, Spencer was a consultant at Deloitte and McKinsey, where he worked extensively in the TMT practice. At Nielsen Sports, Spencer is also responsible for leading the consulting practice in the UK and Ireland. And to date, he's worked on a variety of strategic projects as well as sponsorship and broadcast valuations for some key global clients, including rights holders FIFA, UEFA and World Rugby, brands ASICS and Sega, and broadcasters BT and ITV. Here's Spencer to discuss how changing attention spans are prompting rights holders to rethink. Spencer Nolan, welcome to the show.
Thanks very much.
We always kick off with a few easy icebreaker questions just to help the audience get to know you a little bit better. I've had a couple of standard icebreaker questions that I've been asking, but I've changed this one, so I'm mixing it up a little bit, so hopefully it goes well. But if you could be anyone else in the world for a day, who would you be and why?
Wow. Okay. Well, I think I guess it's probably a bit of a stock answer, but I think any of the big tech companies out there, the big four, like the Amazons, the Facebooks, the Googles, the Apples. But I think probably Jeff Bezos, who just I think the way that Amazon are going about various different things, he's kind of privy to a lot of knowledge and information because they spend a lot on like R&D and things like that. So I think they're throwing money at stuff to find out the answer about whether it's kind of going to work for them as a business. And so there's lots of wider implications for that. So it'd be pretty cool to kind of know some of the things that he probably knows and the work they're doing around AI and things like that would be pretty cool. So, I'd probably go with him, although he's not supposed to be the nicest guy to work for. So maybe it could also be like that for a little bit as well.
Very good. And second icebreaker question is, what was your first ever job?
Okay, I was a paper boy. I was about 10 or something like that, and I ended up being one of the oldest paper boys in the world. I was 18, and I was still doing it before I left the university. So, paper boy was my first job.
Very good. Spencer, you're the head of consulting UK and Europe at Nielsen Sports. You've had stints at some of the big players in the consulting field. What's been your pathway and experience to your current job up until now?
Okay. So I did a general business management degree, and then I knew I wanted to go to consulting to kind of get a good level of kind of responsibility at a young age, I guess, and look at lots of different sectors. So, I think it's a great piece to be able to do that at a young age. And then, I think after that, a few people kind of get slightly itchy feet and a bit more accountability. So, I think that's important. So, a lot of people move into industry, as did I, and so. Interested in the media and entertainment space, I moved into Liberty Global, where I did like an M&A and strategy role. And then I was there for about 10 years, really enjoyed it. And then eventually wanted to move into sports. And the opportunity came up with Repucom as was and Nielsen Sport as is now, and to head of consulting. And so, it's a really interesting space at the moment. So that's kind of my pathway.
So now, at the moment, you're, as I said before, head of consulting UK and Europe at Nielsen Sports. Now, that sounds like a big and a important job. What does it entail? Where do you focus your attention normally?
I think first and foremost, my focus has been on the UK at least, to start with, and supporting our UK MD and just make sure we hit our numbers is obviously important for any for most businesses, and the kind of a sales or business development kind of angle to it. But then outside of that, from a consulting point of view, it's kind of obviously delivery of quality projects and ensuring kind of the team management and resource allocation and the operational side of that's important. I think also bringing in kind of new products and ideas from the Nielsen mothership and how they might apply to our clients is important. So yeah, I think there's various different pieces, but there's loads to go at. Some people say we're drowning in opportunity, which sounds great, but in other ways it isn't great. And I think prioritization is super important. So got to keep our eyes on the sales and biz dev, but maintaining kind of delivering quality work as well.
So trend number 3 in Nielsen Sports Commercial Trends in Sport 2017 is the changing attention spans, prompting rights holders to rethink. Your research shows that people are intensely interested in fewer things, but generally interested in more things. Can you explain what that actually means and some of the numbers and your research behind it?
Sure, yeah. So we do a study called Sport DNA, which is in around 30 markets biannually, where we're asking consumers various questions at a top level. But certainly one of them is about their interest in categories and passion points. And I think what we've seen over the last 7 years, we've been commissioning this, is that, as you say, kind of people are generally interested in more things. And it's around 15% increase over the period where people are just interested in generally more things, as you say. And that's been enabled through, like tech. So the fact that everyone's got a smartphone, the fact that broadband speeds are pretty high now, and therefore the explosion of kind of content, video content, means that we've all got a broader set of things that we kind of might be interested in there. But the detriment of that is that ultimately we do only have a certain amount of brain span and bandwidth for this. And so I think that the areas that we're now seeing as well is that actually 50% are intensely interested in fewer things. So, that piece is really hard to get to because, people are just, they have that attention span that doesn't allow them to be intensely interested for as many activities and passion points. So that's certainly a trend we're seeing, and certainly playing out in the sports and entertainment space.
Well, when I hear that attention spans are changing, I think, yeah, but if the content is good, then I'll watch loads of it. And so Netflix is a great example. I don't necessarily do this, but I know people who will binge watch an entire series as soon as it comes out. Now, that just tells me that the content, if the content is good enough to capture their attention and that it's good enough to keep them engaged, how much pressure is there now on rights holders and brands to work together to create truly engaging content?
Yeah, it's a common one. I think we've got to bear in mind that kind of Netflix is even their top series don't draw massive audiences, and except a few hits ultimately. And so these hits, like the House of Cards, I mean, they're spending millions per episode on these pieces of content, and so even the biggest franchises in the US just don't have that level of money to put towards content and driving content. So I think that the comparison's a little bit better, but yeah, absolutely not. Huge pressure in the market now for both writers and brands to kind of work together on creating engaging content, as you say, cutting through to make sure it's of interest to both the few as well as the many, and then driving that engagement. So yeah, we're seeing a lot more co-funded content from a rights holder and a brand perspective, for sure.
A few episodes back, we had Max Barnett on the show discussing how IP owners are controlling content and the conversation. I want to ask a similar question to one I asked Max, and that is that many in the marketing and content space for some time now have spruiked that brands, and in this context I mean rights holders, not those brands sponsoring, that they should see themselves as publishers. If rights holders truly embrace being a publisher, and I know that there is no silver bullet to any of these challenges, but if they did truly embrace being a publisher, wouldn't that be a massive step forward, assuming they focused on the best content for their audiences?
I mean, yeah, short answer is yes, absolutely. We're certainly starting to see some of the bigger rights holders driving that content agenda, and we're having teams and budgets available to do this. So it's certainly starting to happen. But of course, for them, there's a balance of keeping those paying sponsors happy, and therefore, these elements of co-creation of content, between right and brand is happening. But yeah, we've certainly seen, from a research point of view, that if it's an owned platform, then you're more likely to, or to work out the audience by consumer to engage with that content, and more likely to use the content. So yeah, it's critically important that they're not just aware that's driving this change that we're seeing, but having the budget available is difficult, and the balance of keeping the sponsors happy is also a thing that all rights holders are struggling / concerned with at the moment.
You mentioned it before. One of the reasons our attention spans are changing is because we have so much access to content, and broadband speeds and even mobile data speeds are greater, and that's all quite often through our mobile devices. Considering on average people spend about 83 hours per month on their mobile phones, should rights holders and brands be focusing, do you think, on a mobile-first approach to engagement?
I think what's more important is that it's a content-first strategy. So that's the key piece, really. I mean, what is it that the audience wants to consume, the type of content? And so absolutely mobile is a critical lens. We look through that, and much of the content is going to be relevant for mobile, but just as we use different social media platforms to tell other different stories or use different types of content between, say, an Instagram or a Facebook or a Twitter, absolutely important is to get that kind of a messaging up front, and what is the type of story we want to tell to a certain consumer group, let's say. So the content first, but mobile, I wouldn't say second, but just another lens to kind of deliver that content ultimately.
Nielsen Sports Report notes that women, millennials and centennials are increasingly attractive fan segments, and that each group requires a distinct approach. Why do you think those fan segments are becoming increasingly attractive? Because they've quite often, those segments have been there for some time. Why are they becoming increasingly attractive, and why do rights holders and brands need to approach them in different ways?
Okay, I guess if we take each of them, so women, yes, look, there's a lot of them. They've been here a while. So I think we're seeing it as more interested in sport. We've seen that through our research. So I think there's like a 30% increase in football over the last 5 years from the female segment. So that translates into a huge kind of number of interested or additional interested followers to sport, to football in this case. There's that kind of the health and the well-being angle, and we've seen great amounts in the curriculum and education, trying to keep those people involved in sport for longer. So yeah, we've seen that kind of coming through a lot more. And when you talk about millennials, there's like the current demographic everyone's talking about, they're the near future. It's a wide, broad demographic, millennials, a relative kind of blunt tool, if you like. And centennials, well, they're the ones that the rights holders and brands need to kind of attract for the future. They might not necessarily be the largest segment right now, but certainly engaging them now is critical to the future of their success in terms of brand building, in terms of success for the rights holder, and creating interest in their sport. So while it is true that we mentioned there are blunt segments, we have a better understanding of who they are, who tell them effective stories and drive them engaging content. And yeah, look, we need to talk about the localization of that content, languaging for different markets, all of which are kind of critical. So yeah, there's lots of things there for the rights holders and the brands to kind of they need to do to approach them effectively, I think, with the right content.
Apart from those market segments becoming more important, changing, needing different approaches, I'm interested in a deeper way in what's changed, because for years old men in grey suits have been the guardians of tradition and loath to adjust anything that might mean proper change. And to be fair, it is kind of hard to argue for change if nothing is actually wrong. So if TV revenue is really strong and participation is steady, it can sometimes be hard to convince those grey-haired men in grey suits that we do actually need to change. Why do you think we see so many rights holders pouring resources into new formats now?
Well, I'd probably challenge the question a little bit. I think
you're allowed to do that.
Are all about. That's good. I'm glad, because I think the TV revenue piece, but you see the big numbers of like the football, say the Premier League or the Australian market there, the big uplifts for AFL or NRL, etc. I mean, there's kind of a bifurcation that's happening in TV, and so it's kind of the haves and the have-nots. And so you are seeing the increases for the must-have, but then for some of the secondary and certainly tertiary kind of, let's say, sports property, and actually TV revenue, there's a struggle there to kind of get the exposure on the terrestrial or pay TV. And so that certainly kind of is a question mark there. And in terms of participation, it obviously depends on the sport, of course, but certainly in a number of markets, and for certain sports, we are seeing some declines there. Either steady or some declines. And so yeah, it certainly depends on what we're talking here. But yeah, there's pressure now, I would say. And they also have to think, well, what's going to happen in the next 10, 20 years? Or, the millennials kind of push through to kind of be the major purchasing group. And there's the centennials who, might never engage with the content because they follow it rather than participate in it, if you like. So they need to be brought now. So yeah, the new format, is certainly a key trend that we're seeing in the market at the moment for those kind of reasons. Really, the pressure is already kind of on for a number of sports to engage with that millennium centennial audience.
And quite often, those new formats involve shorter construction of sports like T20 and options like that. What's your opinion? Does creating those shorter event formats cannibalise the more traditional formats, or is it a case of more is better in terms of either attracting new fans or actually engaging existing fans more?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it? I mean, from my view, it's absolutely right. So they have to be careful not to alienate their existing fan base, and that potential of cannibalising. But no, I'm certainly more of the opinion that it is certainly better in terms of that attraction of new fans or engaging those existing fans in a different way. And so, yeah, the whole idea of, you've got to speculate to accumulate. I mean, you need to be more innovative in this day and age for the reasons we mentioned earlier, really. And so engaging those fan bases, both new and existing, by trying something new, is important. And so, yeah, I believe it's additive at the moment for a number of great times.
I'm all for more sport on TV. It's great when summer rolls around in Australia. Here, we get about 4 or 5 weeks of Big Bash T20 on cricket pretty much every single night. And while my son and I love it, my wife doesn't much care for it. Now, Spencer, we've seen many rights holders across the world tweak their scheduling. The NFL introduced Thursday night football, and the Premier League have carved out a package of Friday night live games. How does simply moving an existing game, so not changing the format, but just moving an existing game, for argument's sake, from a Sunday to a Thursday or a Friday, how does that actually attract more attention?
Yeah, so I guess there's a few factors here, but typically a lot of live sport is consumed on a weekend. Seeing some people playing, some people watching, but there's a busy amount of sports being scheduled on TVs on the weekend. So they're moving it away from that. Allows obviously potentially existing / new audience to kind of come and look at those sports, but I guess also you're allowing kind of the change in distribution. So of course. It might just be that it's on exactly the same channel, just on a different night. But often you're seeing something in the US at the moment. Then Twitter, for instance, is able to broadcast some of the games at the same time as the traditional broadcaster, and therefore it might reach a wider or a different audience. And then ultimately, you can also kind of tweak around with the formatting and the presentation of the sport. So whilst it doesn't have to be a new format, as we talked about earlier, it's very much kind of tweaking the way you might, position the sport or talk about the sport and tweak the format. So a way of being innovative as well. So yeah, there's a few factors at play on there, I'd say.
Tweaking schedules can't be as simple as just, as you started to allude to there, it can't be just as simple as shifting games to free nights of the week. We've seen, particularly in Australia, the National Rugby League competition run Monday night games for a number of years before it became obvious that the fans and the people, we just hated it and it was axed. That can clearly damage a rights holder and hinder brands in achieving their ROI and ROO, particularly around the sponsorship space. How does the sport get the tweaking in terms of the scheduling right? What sort of things do they need to consider?
Right. Obviously they need to assess the competing schedules. So, what are the sports that are kind of playing out that time? What's popular? What do they mean? What could they kind of counter schedule against, etc. So I think understanding their target market, so their existing fan base, potentially casual fan base as well. When might be the most appropriate or best way of presenting content to them. We talked about tweaking the format. Of course, that's kind of another element we can kind of take into account. How can they deliver that content to the consumer group? Like by giving it a free window or something like that. So through Twitter or Instagram stories for the short form version of weekly content, for instance. There's different ways, I think. So being able to be innovative, it's not just about just shifting the games around, but it's also can be risky. It's not easy to get it right first time. So there's some experimentation which can frustrate or alienate some viewers. But that's the risk ultimately to try and get the rewards now or later down the line.
It's a great segue, that final comment, into my next question about the risk to get rewards further down the line, because the Big Bash, Australia's T20 cricket competition, based on average attendance figures, is now 9th on the list of most attended sports leagues in the world, yet it has lost 33 million Australian dollars over the first 5 years. And I remember reading stories in the early days of the Indian Premier League T20 competition that the vast majority of fans were there on free tickets to help fill the stadium, so it looked good on TV. Now, there's a danger that rights holders can commit to different formats of their offerings and that they fall flat. And traditionally, rights holders can point to past successes and engaged audiences when they're selling sponsorship year on year around the same format. But for rights holders seeking sponsorship of new formats, is it really just a case of building a vision of what it can actually achieve and trying to sell that to sponsors?
Yeah, no, that's right. You have to set out the vision. As you say, that there's maybe no history for that specific new format, but obviously, there's a good chance that they have to start somewhere, and they've developed the format and the competition as it currently is, which has been probably a success in the main area of the competition. But so these new formats, you're selling the vision. Sponsors, have a cleaner platform to work with, maybe less clutter. They're starting on the journey. It's new. It's exciting. You could potentially even say good chance it will be cheaper for brands to come in and sponsor / activate around the sport. So I think that's absolutely the case. So, you have to set out the vision early, and hope that sponsors will come on board with that. And you do see that. You do see some successes with that, I think.
Well, considering that new formats are usually unproven, yet rights holders have had probably certain mindsets and levels and expectations around existing sponsorships when they're selling it year on year. With new formats, should they be adjusting their expectations and, for want of a better phrase, be ready to accept lower values of sponsorship?
I guess the short answer is yes. For the reasons we mentioned earlier, it's unproven, and therefore it's they shouldn't be expecting the same level any time in the short or even maybe medium term. So look, it depends on the objectives ultimately. So is the new format there to drive specific significant revenues or is it more of a break-even marketing platform that allows brand building and bringing people into, let's call it the main tournament or sport, if you like. So it depends on the objectives to some extent, but as we say, it's kind of very difficult to monetize some of these things, and yeah, you wouldn't bet the house on some of them, but it's a way of building a brand and a marketing platform for, as I say, for the health of the main sport, if you like.
When looking for sponsorship of new formats, do you think rights holders should be seeking more from their existing sponsors and putting opportunities to take more from those existing sponsors? Do you think they should be having a more augmented portfolio in terms of sponsors having rights across multiple formats, or do you think they should be siloing it all and taking this as an opportunity potentially to bring challenger brands in underneath their umbrella?
Yeah, good question. I mean, again, it probably, unfortunately, it does depend on the objectives of the rights holder and what they're trying to do. I guess if it's all about revenue maximization, then that's probably one approach. Versus, do they need to get maybe younger, cooler, different types of brands involved in their sport to help drive the overall attractiveness of that sport? And so, I think what we see is that certainly most rights holders try to separate, their sponsorship portfolio, if you like, and therefore broaden the portfolio, but it's not always a successful piece, and therefore you often see that they might end up coming back to their existing sponsors and saying, well, actually, if we provide you with this extra level of content and competition, then you wouldn't kind of pay more for that. So yeah, I think you see both sides of it, but I think more often than not, you do see it being more of a case of adding to existing. But yeah, it certainly depends on what they're trying to do and how easy it is for them to sell in the let's call it the secondary or the new format.
Are there any benefits that you see or that you are of the opinion, and when I say benefits, I mean properties or inventory, that you think are very underutilised but are yet perfectly suited to either new formats or addressing changing attention spans?
That's not an easy one. I think ultimately sponsorship, certainly in the major sports, there's a significant amount of clutter, and you've got sponsors who've been working hard with the rights holders to drive the most value for a long period of time. So we're seeing a lot of innovation in that space. But I still think things can be done better. So things like just well packaged social media content. You're obviously seeing a bit more like AR/augmented reality/virtual reality as a type of content. I think it's kind of becoming more interesting for certain players. But yeah, ultimately, I think the short form, kind of exclusive highlight type of content and being able to provide that to the consumer, in an easy, digestible, quick format, is kind of really does have traction and is starting to be monetized by some rights holders. But yeah, I think there's still a lot of way to go for that to be kind of fully utilized by both rights holders and brands. So yeah, it's probably there.
Content delivery and consumption can sometimes be really hard to track through to direct engagement with a brand. What options are there to measure success of content, and how do you advise people to do it well?
Right. I think, again, it's about being clear on the objectives. So, are they looking for reach or acquiring an audience/fan base? Is it about engagement, as you say? Is it about conversion/monetization? I mean, it should be about all three ultimately, but it depends on where they are in their life cycle. And so, but with specifically around engagement, is it about the video views or click-through rates? How are we going to measure that? Is dependent on what the objectives of the campaign or the association with the sport might be. I think ultimately, what I would be saying is let's be crystal clear on the objectives of why we're getting involved in this, kind of from a brand perspective, why we're getting involved with this rights holder, what are we trying to get out of it, how are we going to tell our message in the right way, and are we looking to grow an audience, engage an audience, or about, let's say, bottom line, how many people are going to click through and purchase something from my website, let's say, or, and work down the purchase funnel. So let's be clear on objectives, and then let's base the measurement or KPI system off the back of that, probably.
One of the attractive things sponsors see in being able to use content to engage fans is the prospect of turning a fan of a rights holder into an engaged consumer of that sponsoring brand. Now, essentially, that's about the transition from renting or borrowing an audience to owning one of their own, but doing that through the rights holders platform, clearly. Do you have any stories of success in terms of people you've worked with, and you can make it anonymous, to help change their approach to achieve that, and how immediate is success if it's done properly?
Okay, I mean, yeah, I guess, why do we think kind of brands get involved in sponsorship is an interesting question. They're certainly going to get media and kind of exposure / opportunity to integrate branded content. They're going to have IP. They're going to have hospitality / tickets. But as you say, look, they should be having an association with a passionate fan base. So, you have to define the audience segment, the behaviours, the impact. Sponsorship is important for them to know. Also, just the platform that they have the right to activate on that platform with that right holder. So, understanding the activation as it regards to kind of marketing its modelling and how consumers move down the purchase funnel is absolutely important. But it probably depends as much on what is the type of the product. So, the consideration set for a car is going to be very different to kind of a fast-moving consumer goods. So I'd also probably say that it depends on the brand itself and the product / service that they're selling. If they finally get the consumer to engage or to buy the product, then ultimately it's only as good as that product is going to be. You need to get it. You can lead a horse to water, but you can't get it to drink. Kind of analogy. But we do work with a number of rights holder clients who we see their understanding of their consumer set and how they need to change the platform to engage with the consumers through let's say social media content. It really helps drive engagement and viewership, and the brands see significant uplift on their buying rates in terms of click through, or it could indeed be actually purchasing some of the product. So it can be done pretty quickly, if you're being honest. But it certainly that's like weeks / months. But ultimately, it does depend on the product. So I think that.
Spencer, your role is broad and it's in a rapidly changing and fragmented market. Apart from Nielsen's great content, how do you keep up to date with what's happening in the sponsorship space?
You mean outside of Inside Sponsorships podcast?
Correct answer. You just got 2 points.
Look, I think I probably split it a little bit by kind of marketing angle. So, things like the Drum and Marketing Week. From a sports kind of sponsorship angle, I think Sports Pro and Leaders kind of content is pretty good. And then, I think we all have to be cognizant of how tech is influencing and innovating around sport. And so I quite like kind of Recode, even a bit of TechCrunch. There's some others out there, but you can only get around so many. But they're kind of the ones that I use. Even LinkedIn is actually not too bad because, depending on who you are affiliated with, you get pushed a reasonable amount of content through that you can walk through as well.
And to be fair, Spencer, you've only got so much attention that you can divide across all those channels.
Right, that's it.
Spencer, if people want to get in touch with you, connect on social media, etc., what can they do?
Yeah, sure. So, Spencer Nolan, I'm on LinkedIn. So that's probably the best form of contact. And, I'll have to kind of continue this kind of conversation with others.
Spencer Nolan, Head of Consulting, UK and Europe at Nielsen Sports. Thank you so much for taking us inside changing attention spans and how they are prompting rights holders to rethink.
No problem. Great. Thanks for having me.
It's such a period of change, but at the same time a period of immense opportunity and creativity if both rights holders and brands are willing to work together properly to achieve well-defined objectives. So thanks again to Spencer Nolan for spending some time with us, and I trust that you found some thought-provoking views in the chat with him. That's about all we have time for in this episode. Be sure to head to the show notes at sponserv.net where I've provided all the links if you'd like to get in contact with Spencer and connect with him, or even download a copy of Nielsen Sports Commercial Trends in Sports 2017. Don't forget to head to sponserv.net also to read Mark's blog in detail. And of course, if you aren't getting the blogs or the podcasts directly to your inbox each and every week, then just shoot me an email or sign up at sponserv.net. If you haven't already, do us a massive favour and head to iTunes and leave us a review. Reviews help others just like you find the podcast and learn from others in the industry. So it really is important, and I hope you can help. If you want to connect with me, then you can do so on LinkedIn. Just search for Daniel Oyston or drop me an email at daniel@sponserve.net. And of course, you can connect with Mark Thompson on LinkedIn or email at mark@sponserve.net. And don't forget that you can follow us on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter and Instagram. Until next time, I'm Daniel Oyston. Thanks for listening to Inside Sponsorship.
Thanks for listening to the show. For more episodes, blogs and resources, head to sponserve.net or search for Sponserve on Facebook, Twitter or LinkedIn.